Hey, it's Magda. Today we're going to talk about the importance of light and take a closer look at a Roy DeCava photograph from the 1970s in New York. While I can't show you the original image, here are 3 studies I did that show different aspects of the piece, but I highly recommend that you look up the original image. It's truly breathtaking, and there's a real physicality to space and sense of place and atmosphere that photography really exemplifies that I was not able to capture in these studies. But that's fine. That's not what we're focusing on today. As you can see in these 3 studies, light plays a really integral role in this piece. The way that the figure is lit in this really dramatic way allows us to get a much closer look into their life. If that light wasn't there, we wouldn't be able to see them clearly, we wouldn't be able to see the window clearly, and without that clarity, we can't sort of project and imagine what's happening. I find this photograph incredibly interesting because it seems like DeCava didn't know the subject of the photo, that it might have been taken from below or from across the street into someone else's building, and it provides a really interesting portal into someone else's life. While the subject, it would be very hard to identify them, we can imagine so much about their lives. Why are they looking in that direction? What are they going towards? What's in their future? What brought them here? This really dramatic light provides a sense of clarity and openness. That light provides this sense of openness and identity and imagination. The image itself is deeply grounded in this particular geometry of the window. The way that the lines intersect could not have been set up, and it seems like it's the result of someone living somewhere for a while, and gives the photo this sense of identity and place that would not be there if the window was cropped out of the image. Think about how DeCava used light as a tool to create a sense of narrative, drama, and imagination, in something which might have seemed mundane. Now think about things that you see every day, places or objects that you take as ordinary. When we take all these things as mundane for granted, we miss out on a considerable amount of beauty and magic in everyday life. Think about a few objects that you see every day and create some images around and using these objects that use light as a tool to create a sense of drama and intrigue in the piece. So in my prep sketches, I really like to experiment with the movement of the image and what kind of shapes that I'm using. So I was really thinking about doing dots initially, and I wanted to have 2 figures in a window and interacting with the window some way, because just like the Roy DeCava piece, it's a really good way to use light and have a source of light that's coming from an unknown place. So I was thinking a lot about this color palette, and I've always loved the color palette of like sort of oranges and mustards with like a really strong kind of medium blue or like a phthalo blue. And so then I was thinking a lot about the angles of the faces of the 2 figures. So then I moved on to think a lot more about facial expressions and what that might look like in terms of the direction of the light. And so I was thinking about how I can make these faces kind of exude something that feels calm, and in terms of the relationship between these 2 figures for them to feel more calm. And I was thinking about if one figure's inside the window and one figure's outside, that creates a certain amount of tension. And so maybe it's 2 figures that are best friends or they know each other really well. So then I started thinking about, okay, if I'm gonna have these 2 figures in a rectangular frame, one's in the window, one's out of the window, what direction of the light? If it's a light coming from a source like right here and it's coming downwards, is it coming downwards and we're looking down at the figure with the window open? Is it the figure open and we're going this way? So you have to think about the viewer's perspective on these 2 figures with the light source. And don't get intimidated by that, because that's something that you see all the time and you don't even think about it. When you're taking a picture, that's what you're considering, the viewer's frame point. The viewer... That's fine. That's fine. They get it. So I was thinking about framing this image, and I decided that a landscape view would be best because then we can kind of see how the light travels and how that light dissipates or fades away into this dark blue kind of background. And so then getting even more kind of in depth on the direction of the light on these faces, looking at if I want these two faces looking at each other and I know that there's a direction of light that's coming from this way, do I want the light coming this way, or this way? Because the light shows different aspects of your face when it's coming at different places and can kind of emphasize different emotions. So in the Roy DeCava piece, it was just like this kind of front part of the face, which emphasized like looking forward and this sense of like kind of hope or like foreshadowing. But on these faces, I wanted a light that kind of gave some sense of calmness and kind of a commonality and link between them, a light that kind of went like this. And so I decided that instead of having more of a downward light that might be right here, or a light that's coming from diagonally, like right here, I wanted a light that was more central, like overhead, some sort of ceiling fan type of light, where the light would go kind of like this. And if you've done any physics, you know that light doesn't really bounce like this unless it's a prism. But in art, we can make our own rules. But also, of course, the light is still going like this, but the way that we see it, because the light is absorbing and bouncing off of these faces, we see the light going like this instead of like this, because that's an implied line, a line that your eye kind of makes when it links two things together, but the line isn't actually physically in the image. So now you know how I kind of work through a problem like this in terms of looking at the light and the characters and how we frame it. Let's look at how several other contemporary artists solve this problem and use these tools in their work. Hey, welcome back to the studio. So we've looked a lot at how light can be used as both a directional tool in art and as something that can emphasize both emotion and narrative in a piece. We've seen it in all different ways in 2D art, both in our prep sketches and looking at how we can change that, and taking our prep sketches into a final piece of how we can use light as a directional quality and as something that shows emotion and relation between maybe two figures or giving a sense of place. But how can light be used in a 3D piece? Decide what was most successful about your piece. Was it the certain shapes that you used, your color scheme, the way that you used light in terms of either the relationship between the figures or the sense of drama that it added to the piece? Choose certain elements from it, either the shapes, the color scheme, or the two figures, and see how you can apply that into a 3D piece. Find any small container, like an Altoids can or something along those lines, maybe a coffee can or a can of tea, and create a tiny world based on the piece that you made. So then when you're going somewhere, you're on the train, you're busy, and you feel overwhelmed, you can always come back and visit your tiny world to get a sense of peace. What does your tiny world look like?